Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Be More podcast. I'm Brittany.
I'm Maria, and before I start, Happy New Year, everyone!
Oh, yeah.
Happy 2021.
Good call.
This is our first episode, 2021, and we have a guest. Alexis, thank you for coming on.
Thank you
Um,
guys. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you. Brittany, do you want to introduce our guest since you guys are friends?
Yes. Okay. So, do you want, this is going to be so repetitive, but that's okay. So Maria and I grew up living across the street from one another. So
Mm-hmm.
before I'll let Alexis kind of talk about like how we know each other, but before everything, like pre the time we knew one another, Maria and I were super, super close. And a lot of what we've done on this podcast has really been just about continuing the conversations that we had growing up as kids, where I used to like go to her house all the time and just vent, and then we vent at each other and sit there for hours. But we wanted to be able to include other people in the conversations and then share those conversations with more people so that other people can realize, kind of like what we said to you, that they're not alone. And like we all have very different personal journeys, but a lot of the like things that we feel are very similar because we're all human. And we wanted to have you on the podcast to talk about like your own journey, because I know you have a lot of things that were unique to me to
Mhm.
see that I know that you comfortably talk about in public. And I love that. But so, how you want to tell everybody kind of like how you and I know each other?
Yeah, absolutely. So Brittany and I were in the same dance program in college, but we didn't actually really know each other because we were a year or so apart. So we
Mm-hmm.
actually connected in our yoga teaching certification. I did it the summer after I had graduated college, which was probably still one of the best experiences of my life. But Brittany and I were kind of the two, along with one other girl, were kind of the two like older ones of the pack because everyone had like just finished their freshman year. So I don't know, I
Oh
connected
God,
with her
yeah.
because there was a level of maturity there that her and I kind of shared. Not to say that any of the other people were immature. I mean, everyone in the program was wonderful, but
Mm-hmm.
we were in a smaller, intimate group because there was only about 20 of us. And so I was really able to just kind of share my yoga teaching journey with Brittany when I was just getting started.
Oh wow. So, so you guys
Which is
were so you
crazy.
guys
Like,
were like older, like four freshmen in college. I still consider them like super children, like compared to like if you're a senior or like in grad school. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
for
like
sure.
we could, yeah, we could kind of be able to carve out our adulthood journeys and
Yeah,
they were just getting started in there. So yeah, there's a
gotcha,
big difference in 4 years.
gotcha. All right, that's
if
cool.
I remember correctly, my struggle with being through, and I had just finished my master's program. I think I like had my major first like existential crisis going through that yoga program. And then there were like freshmen who were just super excited about teaching and maybe weren't, not going to speak for whatever experiences they were having, but I know that I very clearly was not at the same place that a lot of them were.
Mhm.
So it was really nice to have like some of us be a few years older, um, to go through that together,
Yes, I completely agree.
Cool.
because that whole program definitely, I don't know about for you, but that whole program definitely shifted. My entire life was dedicated to just dance, and that
Hmm.
was the only form of, honestly, really there's like movement that I ever really did, because I never did sports growing up. I never did like any other form of physical activity other than dancing.
Yeah.
And then we went into the yoga program and I started to realize, I love dance, but I think I just love I like everything of movement. And then we started to learn like a lot of the sciences,
Hmm.
because we didn't really get that in our dance program. We didn't get
Hmm.
enough of the sciences.
Hmm.
And then I just realized like, hey, I love movement. And I know that you like are so involved in movement right now. You do so much different, like so many different movement things. So what
Yes.
are those? Are you doing that for fun? Are you doing that for work? Like what are you involved in, and what type of work are you doing right now?
Yeah. So I actually, just to go back to what you were saying before, I completely agree that yoga kind of just expanded my love for movement for sure. And so I graduated with my BFA in dance. And I was like, I'm definitely going to go into teaching. I was feeling a lot of burnout when I graduated college. I didn't even know if I wanted to pursue dance. I actually took, after we finished our yoga teaching certification, I took a year to work in an office. I worked for the admissions office at our college. So it was just like a wild, I needed a break from movement because I needed to kind of reignite my passion. So yoga was the perfect introduction into that. And then I spent a couple years just teaching dance and yoga, and September of 2019 was when I decided to also get my personal training certification. I had just kind of explored just on my own, you know, resistance training and weightlifting and bodybuilding a little bit, not a lot, but just kind of on my own. And I was like, hey, I already have the tools. That I am already a teacher. I kind of already know how to spread this to other people. Like, why not just get the certification? So I did. It was, not to say it was easy, but I felt like I could kind of go back to my prior experiences and my prior knowledge from yoga and dance and just be able to bring all of that knowledge into the certification. So yeah, I mean, that's what I'm doing now. It's my full-time job, just, well, full-time, multiple jobs. But so I have dance, I have yoga, and I have fitness and personal training. So I'm able to kind of blend all those three. And it took me 5 years from graduating from college, but I can finally, support myself with that kind of career.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Very much, very similar.
Yeah.
I was like, Brittany, you have a lot of full-time jobs.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Emphasis on the plural.
Yeah, that is just like I love that you were like, I went into an office for a year. Because I went in and out of offices for a couple of years, and I was like, why am I doing this? I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And like, it was just different. Like I relate to so much of what you said. Totally burnt out by the time we were done. And then was just first, and also I was also like managing a whole, like a plethora of injuries that I had sustained that I had really no idea, and a lot of like mental stuff that I had taken on that I didn't really realize until it's like, oh, now you're an adult and now you have to deal with stuff, and I was not prepared to deal with any of it. But I the exact same thing that you said. I was like, I have all this dance, I have this yoga knowledge, I have like the teaching knowledge. I was like, well, I really like fitness. And you look at, I feel like it's beautiful because in the dance world, we look at movement as a form of self-expression, right? And then with yoga, we really start to look at it as like a healing practice or like a self-preservation practice. And the fitness world doesn't always look at movement with those two aspects. So I thought it was a beautiful thing to bring in those two aspects to what was already happening in fitness. So I so much agree with you, and I relate to like a lot of your journey. I think it's really, really awesome.
I think my main mission that has especially overlapped from my yoga pedagogy into personal training is not using exercise as a punishment and using it as a celebration of just what your body can do. We'll get into it in a little bit, but I have had a lot of chronic illness struggles and autoimmune issues. So that has just driven me personally. And I just get feedback from clients so much that they're like, you're so body neutral when you talk to me. Like, you don't say, oh, we need to burn this fat or, trim this area. You just want me to be able to feel better and have confidence in myself and just be able to have that self-expression of just being able to move and enjoying it. And I think that's just something that's become quite a passion project of mine.
And I have a rhetorical question. This might be like, why is it that exercise has become like a punishment? Like, when we talk about it, like, when did this is again a rhetorical question. You don't have to have an answer for this, but it's just so weird how when you put it that way, I'm like, right, you put the words that I was trying to think of when you're thinking about exercise. It seems like a punishment because it's like, oh, like I have fat in this certain area, I have to like get rid of it. But like, it should be a celebration of literally what you just said, that you can actually still move your body in ways that will benefit you, like at the end of the day. So,
well, I personally think it all comes down to, at the end of the day, which everything comes down to at the end of the day, is capitalism and money and fad diets and exercise programs. And it's just
that's one of Maria's words.
Every podcast I was Alexis, I'm like, there are three things in this world that like screw up the world, and literally I say capitalism, religion, and politics. So the fact that you just said capitalism, just like, there's another one.
A reward or something that we give to our guests if they say
yes. Oh my god, like, should we all take a shot together now that I've said it?
Like, I have water.
Oh
amazing.
Yeah, but I just think yeah, people have made money off of fad diets and weight loss programs and New Year's resolutions and aesthetics and just all of that. And even food places now, like Weight Watchers and Nutrisystem and, whatever else. It's all just everything. It comes down to making money off of us not being educated enough to make our own decisions.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Education is another thing we talk about often.
Well put.
Yeah. I agree with you. When it comes down to, there are three, like we always say, there are three like major
issues.
like the issues or like bodies that we see as like the cause of a lot of these things. But it all results in making people feel guilt, shame, or like uncomfortable, or like they aren't good enough. And we don't see that more than like in anywhere else than we definitely do in like the fitness industry or like and I don't want to say the overall wellness industry, but sometimes it doesn't feel the same, right? I feel like you look at like the pharmaceutical world, like we spend a lot more money on like care than we do on prevention. Like, and like you said, actually educating people. And I even see it, I would love to hear how you feel about this, but I even see it in like a lot of like mainstream yoga practices and a lot of like mainstream yoga like powers that be who influence a lot of like the general population, that even now yoga, which is really has nothing to do with, it was never really about fitness. It was never really about what your body looked like. And now it's so much revolved around like hot yoga classes and like cardio yoga classes and things like that. And it's just, it's very confusing because it waters down and really dismantles like the purpose of what wellness actually really is. And I think that it's so interesting to see, it's another place where there's so many different like overlaps. Like when you go to get your personal training certification, like they don't necessarily talk, I mean, unless you're specifically focused on weight loss, and I don't know what that really looks like, but they don't really talk about anything like strength training and conditioning and overall like actual fitness doesn't necessarily relate to losing weight. It's more about like how does your like body mass relate to your ability to function efficiently and perform as like an athlete or even just perform like a healthy individual. But it's like this weight loss thing, we've put so much shame around weight, and like it's a stupid thing that like even I, like everyone has their issues with it, but even I look at myself sometimes and I'm like, no, that doesn't look the way I want it to look. And it's like, no, okay, guy, you have to get that out of your brain. Your body is so perfect, your body's beautiful. And like I have to start changing that transcript to saying, look at all the things that my body does, not look at all the things that like look at all these things on my body that I don't like.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that people reassigning goals in order to be more about feeling and strength instead of aesthetics definitely can help a lot. Even when I first meet clients, I tell them, all right, we're not doing measurement goals. We can take measurements just to track your progress, but we're going to be neutral about the measurements. If you don't hit a specific goal, then we're just going to work on something else. You know, it's more about, can I get up 2 flights of stairs without feeling winded? Or can I, things like that. Do my joints feel less creaky in the morning? Those things are more important than a specific number on the scale. First of all, I'm going to go on a rant here, but I hate scales. I hate them. There's no point in them. Muscle and fat, like muscle and fat, it can't tell you what's there. And I'm not here to say that like I do believe that there are definitely health risks that come along with obesity, and people should talk to their doctor about that, not to, some random internet like fitness coach who doesn't really have much certification. But I think that they're dumb. I think there's so many other ways to track progress, because especially, and I don't know how many people know this is like basic knowledge to me, but muscle weighs more than fat. So when you gain muscle, you gain weight. And people think that they're not progressing, but in fact they are. So yeah.
Totally agree with you. And I think that we're looking, it comes down to the education, right? The scales that are easily accessible to people are the ones that are just going to talk about weight. And there's so much more information behind that. But it comes back to what you said, like what we need to be measuring are the things that actually really make a difference in terms of your health. Like what types of fat are on your body? What level of visceral fat do you have? Like, are you dealing with like anything hidden behind what's going on like in your weight? Like you have to start like uncovering all of that. Those are the things that we can measure, because at the end of the day, like those are things that matter for your overall health. But your general weight, how much your body weighs, I don't understand whoever thought that was a good idea to even do that. But that's what people are home and readily like evaluating themselves on, is just their weight and not any of that information behind it. And it's very interesting. You brought up we like started talking about the difference between like the aesthetic of how we look versus how we feel. It's so funny because it's like this fight against like trying to look like we're aging. But then like you literally hit a point where like you don't really have a You don't have a choice. Like you're
Yeah.
gonna always look
that's just that's life.
That's
right.
It's
Like,
literally
aging all the
it's
time.
literally
you're
life.
gonna look physically older. There's nothing that you can do about that, right? Which is something that I've been struggling with watching my one of my cats, like her physical movements are starting to change a little bit because she's getting older. But it's so interesting how that's the thing we fight against, and it's like super inevitable. But what we don't always focus on is like how we're feeling and like what's going on the inside, and like the what actually is going to have a bigger determination of our overall like wellness is what really matters. And then it's funny how it's the first thing we complain about though, right? Like, and I know I work with some professionals who I do therapeutics with for yoga, and the first thing that we'll complain about is like, this hurts, but I want to lose this.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like we complain about the stuff that's happening on the inside, but then we still are focused on like the how we look. And how do we, I mean, I think you answered that, right? If we have to start like changing the goals.
Yeah.
And changing what the people are looking at.
It's just awareness, and just, I guess, using our voices just like we're doing now to spread, just a little bit more positivity in terms of goals and stuff, because weight is not an indicator of health at all. And
Agreed.
that, I guess, that transitions into, if you guys don't mind me going on another little rant.
Yes,
I have an autoimmune disease called ulcerative colitis, which is it causes inflammation of the colon. It has nothing to do with diet, exercise, lifestyle. It's predisposed genetic factors plus environmental factors plus anything that could trigger it, stress, whatever. So I weighed about 40 pounds less than I do now. I was under 100 pounds at 5'6". So, I looked like a skeleton, and it was really damning for my health. I was losing blood daily. I had I was iron deficient anemic for like a year and a half after I was diagnosed. It took me that long to just kind of rebuild my health, and losing hair, the under my eye bags were like blue and purple because I had nothing left in my body to give. And I was hospitalized for almost a week, and it's just the amount of compliments you get when you're that thin. And I remember it was probably about a little less than 6 months after so I was diagnosed in a flare, which usually doesn't happen. Most people, it's something small that indicates and it sets them off, but mine came on really fast. So I dropped those 40 pounds probably in about 10 weeks. But
oh God.
It took me a lot longer to gain them back, probably about a year. So this was early 2019. And later on in 2019, I remember going to try on bridesmaids dresses for my best friend's wedding. And, I was thinking to myself, keep in mind, this is like your middle to your body right now. I've gained about half the weight back, but this is not where my body normally sits. And I remember asking for dress sizes like in front of all the other girls. And I was like, well, I'm a 0 right now, but I'll be a 2. And they were like, oh my God, I can't believe, like, I'm a 6, I'm an 8. I'm like, you guys, I literally was, excuse me for like this is very graphic, but I was like shitting blood for like 6 months. Like, you guys don't understand like all the shit that my body went through. It's not an indicator of my health whatsoever. You cannot do enough like cardio boot camps to get to this level. Like, you need to literally have a serious problem in order to get to here. I was like, please do not. It was just, and it just sticks out in my mind so much because I'm not those sizes anymore. And I'm like, I don't miss that. I don't miss that at all. And the fact that people were jealous of it, I was like, again, what Brittany was saying, outside didn't match inside at all. So I wasn't feeling good on the inside. I couldn't exercise. I didn't have the energy. So yeah.
And yet all people saw were literally your dress size.
They couldn't see the bald spots on my head because I was so malnourished, but they were like size 0. Oh my God. I'm so jealous. And I was still gets
that just
me.
makes me so mad because that's just literally capitalism.
These like weird I guess like chills on my back right now because it's just I guess it's worse because it's a truth, right? And that's why your story is so powerful, and I appreciate so much you coming on the podcast to talk about it because we hear about, or like we watch these like stories that are like written on TV, or like things like where people talk about like their experience, like I guess they're not real experiences of weight, or they're written off and based off of somebody's experiences of weight and dealing with their health. But when you hear about it from somebody who's really gone through it, it makes you start to realize like, oh, all of the things that we read about, all the things that we hear about that are on these stories, that are on these shows, like they come from a real experience. Like someone's having this real experience. And it's not until you really hear it from the mouths of the people who are having these real experiences that kind of clicks for you. You start to, and that's kind of like what I'm going through with my chills. But I think it's very, while we were at school, so I'll tell a little bit, I do not, as far as I know, I don't have an underlying health condition. But while we were at school, I was actually probably the most unhealthy that I had ever been, because our training program is very intense. I was not in a good headspace most of the time that we were there, that I went to find out later.
Me too.
And I actually started to realize that a lot of the injuries that I was sustaining not only were because I didn't really know my body well, which is why I dove into all of that, but I wasn't properly taking care of myself. So like my nutrition was a mess. My mindset was a mess. So like I wasn't going to do what I needed to do anyway. And I had such crazy fluctuations in my weight. And after we got out of school, I actually had, so my mother has like anemia. So it's like an issue in my family. And my father has like, brings on lots of gastrointestinal issues. So I remember going, it's just the thing that I'm relating to the most is I remember during the time when I was like, really had to start going to therapy, and my weight was a hot mess, and it was super frustrating and kind of like makes me mad at myself, but I have to be forgiving too. It's because it's what we're molded to think about. It's like, that was probably the point where I was like, oh, my body looks the greatest. Like, oh, like, look at
Yeah, but you're so unhealthy. Yeah.
And then I would go, I'll never forget, I went to my gynecologist who, reproductive issues are also a wonderful thing that I was given by my ancestors. I remember going there, and I remember getting weight on the scale. And I remember and I've known my gynecologist my whole life. She literally walked in and she was like, you're not eating enough. And she's like, or you're not eating the right things. And she was like, just mad at me. She was mad at me. And I sat there and I was like, oh my God. I was like, but I feel fine. Like, I like the way I look. And at that point, I wasn't even thinking. Like, you get so, everything just seems so okay. Or like, you don't want to admit that there's something wrong. I was having like fainting spells and like couldn't pinpoint it.
Oh my God.
And I was having like issues with my Maria, like, you don't even know any of this stuff, do you? This is new.
No.
Oh, and I was having like issues with, I've always had issues with like my period, but I was having these crazy issues where I would get really sick and then like want to pass out from it. And I never thought about how all of those things related. And like, I was a person who cared about health, right? Like I never thought for myself about how all of those things related, because the way that our brains are programmed to be like, whether it's be a female or like what it means to be a healthy looking individual or what it means to like look attractive, all that bullshit that gets pumped into our heads. Like, I started to realize, oh my God, that terrible, like, egotistical monster that was built by the world around me is overpowering my ability to live well. And I was like, I had a huge moment there. I was like, what are you doing, Brittany? And that was when I took a huge stance in doing exactly what you said. I started to put myself through like conditioning and strength training programs, and starting to realize like I was never as strong. Like the time that we were in school, I was never as strong as I should have been, which is why I got injured. I was not eating properly or really like eating enough to manage what I needed to do and all of like the energy that we were outputting. And I wasn't taking care of my like headspace at all, which was the biggest reason why that monster was able to get so big.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I think I slept like 4 hours every night for like every day of college. I was not prioritizing my health that way either.
Yeah, oh no, definitely. But it wasn't an environment where we were encouraged to do that. It just never was. And what's so frustrating is that our society is just not an environment that encourages it. And then the ways that it does get encouraged is the stuff that we talked about with the fitness industry.
Yeah.
So it's like finding finding that balance to be able to, it comes back to that education. Like you said, that's such an important like key, is that people really need to have access to not just all of like the super mainstream what's on Instagram information, but again, aside from that, like I love what you do on Instagram. We want you to be able to share all of that, but not what like seems like it's not grounded in scientific data that's based in to really tell. And the hardest part about it is we're still, even that realm, that foundation is still figuring it out. Like there's so much information that we have when it comes to like personal training, when it comes to weight loss, like we have so much data on that, but every single body is different, and then every generation comes with adaptations to DNA that's going to affect that. And it's this ongoing process, and it's such a big picture that we need to be able to look at. But I think that you bring such a beautiful perspective to it, in being able to say, you know, we have to start, if we want to feel better in here, like this is the one thing that we get to have for our whole lives. We have to stop looking at all of these external sources that are going to tell us how we're feeling, and really start building the awareness to listen and pay attention to how we're feeling, because how you feel is a direct, like, so that's going to be your source to look at to tell you really if you're well or not.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I'm never going to say that having ulcerative colitis is a blessing. I'll never say it. Some people in my community do. I'm sorry. I would rather live without it, but it's given me a lot of things. And one thing is just the self-awareness of how I'm feeling, being able to detect stuff quickly and knowing when something is wrong, and just having that inner voice be able to tell me. And I think that's something that a lot of people need to get more in tune with, which is why I tell everybody I know to do yoga. Because I think even just movement aside, the meditation and the breathing aspect of it, you can really click into something a little bit more internal. But, you know, it led me to detect incoming next autoimmune disease. Led me to detect. So I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis in March of 2019. So I'm only going on 2 years. And then in August of 2019, I was finally in symptom remission, which means, you know, I can function as a normal human being with some limitations, you know, with my diet and everything. So I decided, I was like, you know what? I was in the hospital a few months ago. I'm going to go on a trip. So I went to Croatia summer of 2019, and on the plane ride home, you know, I woke up the next morning and I was like, oh, my joints are so achy. I was just like, this feels so weird. I was like, probably because I didn't move on this like long international flight. And I was like, I'm just going to drink a lot of water and I'll be fine. Next day was Monday. So I went to work. I went to go teach at the dance studio, and I was trying to stand on one leg, which is something that I need to do every day of my life for work. And I couldn't do it. I kept falling over. I kept stumbling around. I was like, there's something wrong with my joints. So I just finished off that class, went home. Next day I tried to open the fridge, couldn't grip the door. My fingers just couldn't bend and hold onto the door. So I turned to my mom and I was like, I have to go to the emergency room. Something's not right. And if it had been before I got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, I would have just said, I'm going to wait it out a few more days, just see what's going on. Drink more water. That's always my thing, is just, I'll just drink more water, get a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
And we went to the hospital, and, you know, I saw a couple doctors. They were like, we're going to go get the neurologist. And I was like, what's going on?
No,
so he comes in.
Terrifying.
And so he comes in and he's like, all right, try to stand on one leg. All right, like, I'm going to push down on your leg. You have to push up and resist against it. Try to squeeze this, push down your fingers, try to like go really quickly to like breeze through your fingers. And he's like, we're going to admit you. I think you have what's called Guillain-Barré syndrome. So GBS is very rare. It's an autoimmune reaction. It's acute, which means it's not chronic. I mean, it just happens once, and then once you recover, it's a long recovery, but once you recover, chances of you getting again are slim.
Oh, thank goodness.
But it attacks the myelin sheath of your nerves, which basically means that your brain cannot send movement receptors to your extremities. So I had a very mild version where I only lost the use of my wrists to my fingers and my ankles to my toes. Some people lose movement all the way up where they need to be on ventilators because their lungs can't contract because the nerves are just not set. Yeah, so I got so lucky.
Oh, thank goodness.
It's a 5-day treatment called IVIG, which is basically the plasma from human bloods pulled out and then inserted into you to help fight against the sheath from getting worse. So I did the 5 days, and they were like, you're going to have to go to a lot of physical therapy after this. We want to admit you into inpatient physical therapy. And I was like, you know what? I'm young. At this point, I had already been through like all of my training and everything. And I was like, I can do this on my own, if I can get a few exercises to take. So left the hospital in a wheelchair, had to be with a walker for about 2 weeks. And I just remember, so I had a shore house with my friends that summer, and Labor Day weekend, I was like, I have to get back to this house. I paid for it already. Like, this is my mindset. But I was like, I paid for it already. I got to go with my friends. Like, my poor boyfriend was like missing all these fun weekends because I'm just like sitting at home, like whatever. So we went down, and I had been to physical therapy for a few weeks. And I just remember it took me like 30 minutes to get on my shoes. But I was like, I'm going to do it on my own.
You're determined to.
You are not helping me put on these shoes. You are not helping me tie these laces. I'm doing it. And I walked, and my physical therapist even said, walking in the sand might be really, really good for you, because so basically when you lose the feeling there, it takes about 48 hours for it to just drop, but it takes about 48 days for the feeling to come back. So what happens is, if these are my feet, you get drop foot. So you basically walk like you have big, like scuba diving flippers on. And they were saying, walking on the beach might be good for your drop foot because it's so uneven that it might actually help like get the feeling back quicker. So
like speed up this process of recovery of trying to get all of the information from your feet.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So it was a really good weekend for that. I was just able to kind of escape from the fact that I was like immobilized at 25 a few weeks earlier, and just be able to be on the beach and walk. And I had to relearn how to write my name. I had to relearn how to hold my phone. I just remember, so like obviously gravity is helpful. So I remember I had my fantasy football draft while I was still in the hospital, and I remember like just like dropping the back of my hand on my mouse every time I needed to pick something, because that was I didn't have the movement in my fingers back yet. But yeah, so that was just such a weird detour in my life. But talking to my physical therapist, I was with them for about 3 months. They're wonderful people. If anybody in New Jersey ever wants to go to a Kessler, I totally recommend it. But not sponsored.
That's my recommendation. My clients too. Love Kessler.
Yeah, they're awesome. They're awesome. And, that even deepened my love for fitness and wellness even more, because they really helped me see the scientific side of it. And like, this muscle contracts and causes this one to move. And, this one can help support this one. And these steps will help stabilize this and everything. So that was really cool, because I think for them too, because they had a client who had a little bit of knowledge other than do this. Okay, what they usually get.
Right.
So yeah, but so I think having Guillain-Barré syndrome, that is definitely what brought me to my little self mantra of exercise is not a punishment, but a celebration of what your body can do, because it couldn't do a lot of things for a while.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I didn't even know that there was something that could do that to your body.
But
oh man, the health anxiety that comes from that.
Oh,
wow, the health anxiety that comes from that, because you find things that you didn't even know that could happen. But
right. I mean,
it's so extremely rare. It's so rare.
Okay, so I have to ask you. Like less than 5 years, essentially, right? Like 2 major autoimmune. Like
that was 1 year. That was all 2019. It was all 2019.
Maybe like less than 5 months.
Okay.
From the timeline that Alexis just said.
You go through all of this, right? And and I just want to tell you, for anybody who's listening to this, like Alexis is like full on conversation using her hands, like she. Like,
for anyone that's like,
oh yeah, I'm complete. I am 100% recovered. 100% recovered. The only thing I struggle with is like really, really difficult like sprays, like hairspray and stuff like that.
Oh, pushing it down.
To use just my right pointer finger gives me a hard time. I can do it with my left, no problem. But that's the only like residual effect that I have from for a year and a half ago. Yeah.
That's amazing. So yeah, just want anybody who's not watching this later and is like, how, like, what has happened? Where is she now? Like I didn't know any. And the thing is, I saw on your Instagram page how you were getting like I was like reading about your story, but I don't think I must not have like seen it from the very, very beginning, because I was like watching your stories and seeing that you were getting, and I thought all of it was just related to your OC.
Mhm.
So now I'm like getting a bigger, this is blowing my mind.
Mhm.
So
I was
2019,
really quiet about it. I do have to say. I was embarrassed. I didn't want people to know I was walking with a walker. I was 25 and a fitness professional. It
Mhm,
was, but
mhm.
and then I mean, that probably circles back to, shame that you were talking about earlier, but it was just something that I felt like was part of my personality traits was, oh, Alexis, the fitness girl. So, and I
Yeah.
think it helped my recovery go faster for sure. But now looking back, there's no shame about it. I couldn't have done anything to change that.
Mhm,
and it's
mhm.
it's so
That's
it's so
probably just
funny,
your
but like
ego
identity,
taking
right?
over
Like
for a second. Yeah.
Mhm.
you identify, like, again, this is all I've been doing a lot of like reading and self-study on like the difference between like ego and true self. And it's so very funny because like who we identify as, a lot of it's related to like our ego, right? And like
Mhm.
what's gone on and what's been developed by society in our brain. And I think it's really great that you bring up like that struggle and having to say like I am not just a fitness professional, because we get taught like to label ourselves. Like for the longest time, it took me a really long time to get away from the fact of saying like I'm a dancer, because I was like, wait, hold on, we can't really, that's not really technically true anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like I love movement, but like we don't need to use that label. Um, but okay, what I really wanted to ask you was 2019, you're experiencing all of this, you're overcoming enough.
Mhm. Still the best year of
2020,
my life.
I love that. I love
That's
that you
that's
say that. 2020, cue like this major global pandemic, and
pandemic.
you're
Yep.
over like just fresh of overcoming to auto like oh boy,
Yeah, how was that?
I
what was that like?
So, okay, so my ulcerative colitis has been in remission since October of 2019. Officially, that's like when the blood test came back with no inflammation. Haven't had symptoms since June of 2019, so it's been over a year, which is just I'm so lucky to have been in
Yeah.
remission for this long, and I hope to continue to be. Um, and going into 2020, I shouldn't say going into 2020 because we didn't know about COVID, but going into March of 2020,
Mhm.
there was a lot of fear at first because the medication that keeps me in remission is technically a immune compromising medication. So basically the way autoimmune diseases work is everybody has this kind of general level that their immune system stays at. Autoimmune disease, everybody's level is elevated, which is why your white blood cells attack your own organ. They confuse it for some kind of intruder.
Mhm.
So the way that they bring it back down to everybody's regular level is by suppressing the immune system so that it can come down to a more base level. So my medication specifically is called Entyvio or vedolizumab, which is specific to the digestive tract. So at first, they were so unsure. They were like, we just know biologics are immune compromising. We don't know much else. As the months have gone on, they've now come to realize that they actually might help prevent severe cases of COVID because they actually are so good at controlling inflammation that
Mhm.
you don't have that overwhelming of the immune system that a lot of people are seeing, that cytokine storm.
Mhm.
So before we knew it, I mean, that was like August when I went to my doctor and found that out. So from March to August, I was just living in this state of anxiety where I was like, if I get COVID, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there was a lot of just anger that I was wasting my time in remission hiding at home. There was a lot, and I'm sure even without like just normal people, there's a lot of anger, just especially people in our generation who are thinking, oh, I'm wasting my youth sitting at home.
Mhm. Right.
But it's just a complicated time, and I'm glad to be using this time just to be able to really focus on my career and develop myself further in that and focus on, finding the balance between professional and personal love. Because I mean, Brittany, I know you can relate. When you make your career out of something that started as an extracurricular, as a hobby, it's really difficult finding the separation, between it being a job and it being a personal passion. So that's been fun. But I mean, I gotta say, even with all of this, I know how lucky and privileged I am to have a roof over my head, to have food, to have my job still. but it's not, it's been good. It has. And I'm lucky, again, like I said, that my dance studio was able to shift our work onto Zoom back in the spring so that our kids could still have, their dance teachers to connect with. And we went back into the studio, and we have masks, and the kids are distanced, and we have smaller groups, and we've been lucky to not have any cases stem from there. But I think just with everybody, chronic illness or not, there's a lot of walking on eggshells of what's going to come next. And, with the implosion of the American government right now, too, there's just a lot of unknowns. And
Oh
and
God.
I don't think I'm any different than anybody else in our generation. Like, I just have that added layer, but it's just been, I'm getting through it,
Yeah, that's all we can ask for, right? Is to get through it
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want to, again, just recognize how lucky I am to be getting through it.
Yes. Agreed.
It's so interesting how the negative or like catastrophic or seemingly catastrophic or not good stuff, the like shit stuff of what it's like to be a human gives you perspective.
It's how life
And
goes, unfortunately.
Right. And then with that, you have, and I'm saying this, like, we have very different situations that gave us perspective. Like, I had my situation, and then honestly, like, breaking my foot when we were in school was like the biggest. Everybody was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," and I like in the moment I was like, "This is it. Like, my life is over." But now I look at it, and I honestly say that I think it's honestly the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because it gave me a huge shift in perspective, which I really needed. But you have two options when you step up to that plate. And it's interesting because with COVID, everyone had to step up to that plate this year of like, this is the shit that's happening that we have to deal with. I think it's powerful and so beautiful and amazing that you stepped up to that plate and took on the perspective, and then wanting to share that perspective with others. And then you can still say, I am very lucky. I'm very grateful. I'm dealing with it as I'm dealing with it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be so stoked about this episode coming out, because that's what we need so much more of, right? Once we start to see one person does it and like another person can do it and more people can do it and step up to the plate, and we share our ability to just have that shift in perspective and share our experiences, other people can be better equipped to step up to their plate themselves. And then the more that we are doing that, there are less people who are dealing with the major like catastrophic shock to your system of actually doing that and stepping up to the plate, because we all have to do that. That's a huge part of being human. We all have our own plate we have to step up to. But the way that we get to relate, the way we get to get through it, is by understanding that everybody's doing it, and we can learn from the perspectives that each of us takes on as we go through that journey.
Yeah.
I'm very happy that you were in your journey.
Oh, thank you. I've had friends say to me, like, I could never do what you do, or you're so strong for doing this. But it's like, yes, you would, because you have to. There's no other choice, And I think a lot of people who have never really had like very difficult things happen in their life, COVID was the first time where they're like, there's only one way, and it's through.
Yeah.
And I think that now that people are realizing that more, they can see how resilient they are. And yeah, I mean, losing family members, my friends who are healthcare workers who are just worked to the bone. There's so many things that COVID has directly inflicted that, we're going to get through it, because that's the only option.
That's the only way. Yeah. It's literally the only way. Like, I think it's just like a lot to, as someone that doesn't know you, obviously it's a lot to process and be like, holy shit, like, you look very well. Like, you would have never known, right? Like, and that also goes back to your like the whole like dress size like situation too. Like, it's like, if someone just says like, oh, that person's size 0, you just automatically, because of society, think that they're healthy in some way, even though size 0 is not healthy to begin with. But just like you talking about your experiences, and then me seeing you, and I hope everyone that's like on Spotify like goes to the YouTube channel and just like Alexis looks like she's well. But like, again, it's like the same thing with like anyone. Like, you don't really know their story until people educate you on your story, and then the education from that stems like all this like it's just brain power for other people to like be like, oh wait, like I should take a step back and like people aren't like there are other layers to people other than like their appearance is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I said before how, Brittany was kind of just reviewing my medical history of 2019, and I said, it was still the best year of my life because I did so many new things that I wouldn't have done if I hadn't gotten sick. After I got out of the hospital, I applied for a new job. And in addition to the one I already have, because I love all my jobs and I love the balance that I found. I jumped into a shore house with a bunch of people I didn't know. I went on a trip to Croatia and met really lifelong friends. I met my boyfriend that year. There were just so many things that um, opened me up to connecting to people, and kind of how you were saying, Maria, of just like, you never know what somebody's going through, and wanting and having a desire to know about people on a deeper level, I think is really what brought me all those great experiences, and just being more open to learning about someone, not judging them based on their appearances. Because if you were to look at me based on my appearance, you would think I was just like, I had no problems, So, and having that willingness to just listen and learn about people, I think that was one of the reasons why it was such a great year, was because I made such true deep connections that still continue today. Yeah. I'm
That's
gonna
what
get
we need.
emotional thinking about all my friends.
No, it's okay. That's honestly what we that's what we need in this world.
Podcast most of the time, so please.
Yeah. Please,
Don't
Brittany's
feel
like
like
cried every so often.
I'm already getting teary just because she said that she's starting to cry, so forgive me. But
Oh God.
Brittany, do you remember? I feel like
so
I cried like
strong.
3 times in our yoga teaching certification too. I was
It
like,
is
that
so-
like opened the
it's so funny because
floodgates.
if I ever would have gone, me now being like actually connected to who I am versus me going back to that program, I would go into that program and take all of like the representative of me that thought she was supposed to be there and had been protecting me for all of those years. And I would sit there and I would listen to everything and I'd think about it in my head. And then on the car ride home, I would break down. So like, I always thought that I like had, you know what I mean? Like that stupid transition that I was going through and dealing with it and didn't have any, honestly, self-awareness to realize. But if I tried to do it now, I would have been crying every day. So I'm with you. But you just pinpointed the thing that I think is the most important thing that I've come to see in the world. Nothing else matters. What dress size you wear, like what the amount of fat that's on your body, like none of that matters. The only reason why I believe that we're here is to be able to connect to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And
I agree.
Because at the end of the day, I very strongly believe that we all come from the essence of the same thing. Like life all comes from the essence of the same thing. We are all the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So unless we truly find a way to, and everything else that's been put here is just like set up as a potential barrier to be able to like set us apart from one another. And like the game of life is about like overcoming those little barriers and getting back to that major connection. So the more that we can do that, like that, I'm gonna start crying. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're gonna cry.
Yeah.
We're gonna cry together because we're doing that successfully, and we're getting the like all the shit that I talked about we deal with as a part of life. Like, that's the good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Agreed.
And I do. I think that we use the way that we educate each other on social connection, or the way that we are educated about social connection, is a lot of like, look at that person and make a comparison. And we focus so much on the external of like what that person looks like. This is how we determine health. And like, if you need to go re-listen to this episode, because we just talked about how all the ways that we externally try to establish somebody's level of wellness is incorrect. But if we are able to stop doing that, or change the way that we do that, and just accept that for what it is, and then allow that to be like the gate that we have to pass through in order to get to that deeper connection, and really talk about like, well, how well are you, and what are you dealing with, and how are we the same? That's the other
But like you should
side
also say like in like deeper connections, like how you're different. I feel like that's also a thing that we should also talk about with deeper connections, like
right, and like learn about those differences.
Yeah, because then it'll only bring together more comparisons,
experiences that we have that are different.
Right.
You're right. It has to be an equal appreciation for both.
because like
in a
I feel
way,
like
which is an amazing.
yeah, I feel like with now we're just talking about deeper connections because I actually did get teary-eyed a little bit when you were talking about like your deeper connections and like you think about your friends, and I don't.
This is amazing. Maria doesn't like to show emotion.
I don't. I really don't. I like my best friend was on this podcast like on my birthday, and I showed like no emotion because like I'm just like that person. So, but just like think
No, I
about
get it.
the deeper connections, and like speaking about like comparisons and like differences and everything. I feel like once you get past your differences, and talking about those uncomfortable situations, like Brittany, I'll talk about this, but when the when the siege happened, I called Brittany that night because like in essence that to me I viewed it as a race issue, right? Like a double standard on like white privilege and everything. And I mean we don't have to go into this, but I wanted to get Brittany's perspective as a white person because I'm Asian. Like I don't know what a privilege even feels like a white privilege. So even that will bring us closer rather than me just like brushing it like aside and not talking about it. Like
Right.
so
Yeah.
things like that, just because like you said, the deeper connection and like how Brittany, this is like why the reason we're here is like to have all these deeper connections. I feel like things like that and things like talking about your health battles to even your friends is like a step up, and like it'll be more fulfilling that other people know your journey rather than just like suppressing it and only having it for yourself.
I think so. And I think I'm just going to pivot completely in a random direction, but
That's fine.
I think having those fulfilling connections with people can lead to a much smaller reliance on material things as well, and just being able to. So I actually decided to do at the beginning of 2020, before all the madness ensued. I decided to go on what's called a no buy. So I was going to not purchase anything unless I needed it. Clothes, shoes, skincare, makeup, houseware, anything. And I did it. But I think that the reason I was so successful was because of those stronger connections. Actually, the reason I was brave enough to think of doing it in the first place was because, I was so confident in my relationships and things that weren't concrete, like conversation and things like that. And I think I was in a place where I was so confident in who I was that I didn't need anything to represent it for me, like clothes. And I'm because I was so successful in that year, and I'm just going to continue on with it as long as I'm not going to get anything. If there's a hole in my turtleneck, of course I'm going to get a new turtleneck. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
but I don't need anything to help define who I am. And I think that was something that again just came from everything just tied itself into each other for me. And having that reflection and that realization and being on this podcast with you guys has really just made me realize that everything, it's all like tied into the same thing of just, finding fulfilling things for yourself.
And going, I always admired, who are the guys? I can't think of. They had a show, I think, or a movie, something that I read, like the Minimalist Guys.
Oh yeah, I think they have a YouTube channel. Yeah.
Okay, maybe that's how I saw them, because I know they had a book and I was really interested. I went through a whole phase where I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna live in a tiny house. I'm not gonna do any, like I'm gonna I minimalize everything. Again, not what we're educated to do. So that was like a huge, I was like, oh my god, that was a whole nother crisis.
Dismantling of your mind. Yeah.
Right, of like what we know. But it's so true, right? It's so weird that our society tells us like buy stuff.
Capitalism.
And it's like we never have enough stuff for the sake of making someone else money. But like, and it's you hear about all these wealthy people who end up being miserable and like have all like everything you could possibly want in the world, and they're still
because like why do you need like $200 billion?
Yeah, it's just
right. Like they don't have the connection, and it's like we can. I mean, it's great that you're finding a good balance of that for yourself, and we again with awareness, with perspective, with intention, like a clear intention, we can find that balance. Because it's not about saying, because then I feel like myself personally, with how like my brain was wired, I would end up going down that path and then end up telling myself, and I've done this to myself, like, oh, you can't spend money on that, and then somehow it ends up at like you're not good enough to have this. That's like the conversation that I'm having in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
there has to be a better way to train that balance, to be able to say, I don't need this. I have what I need already.
Yeah. I
And I
think
think
that
that know-how
everything
does that.
ties back to the yoga practice of doing no harm, because so you got fitness, doing no harm on yourself, your self-confidence, your self-worth. You know, it's more about celebration. We talked about that. Low buys, no buys. You end up eventually by default doing no harm on the environment because you're not putting new product out into the world. You're not creating a demand for more product when you buy something new. You know, yoga, obviously, do no harm. That's on its own. You know, dance, do no harm. I'm helping teaching these kids to find a way to express themselves so that, you know, if they use, for example, on Thursday after, you know, the madness,
Mm-hmm.
it was, politics aside, it was violent, and I wanted to express to my older students, you know, my high school dance students, that if they ever had that kind of anger and rage, just let it out in the studio. Just use that as your way to process what you're feeling. So again, finding a way to channel anger, do no harm, into that. So I don't know, I just related all that back to yoga. That's my main jive. So
And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Maria's learned a lot about like yoga practice through this podcast,
Yeah.
because I connect everything back to the philosophies and the foundations that we learned through yoga. I hope this
Maria,
Like,
do you
I-
practice yoga at all? Do you take classes or anything?
Nope.
you
And like
you
by
try
like
to meditate.
I do try to meditate.
Yeah.
I'm
Is
very
yoga
bad at keeping up with it. I mean,
Mhm.
I feel like that's a common issue with people, especially because
Mhm.
so I am not in any creative space. I am an accountant. So I am tied to a desk, obviously, and that's my desk job, and I do love my profession, but it leaves me very little mind power to do anything creative, you
Mhm.
know, like because I'm just so
Mhm.
tired. And like
Yeah.
even meditation, like it's so like in my mind, meditation is just like it should be very simple to me, but it's not in a sense,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, obviously. So the
Mhm.
upkeep of that, coupled with the fact that especially during tax season, which is like we're happening now from January to April,
Yeah.
it's just like the upkeep of that is just so
Yeah.
hard for me. So that's so, but the thing though is the amount of people that come on here that talk about yoga and like meditation and like all this stuff and like even like chakras, at least just like uh, I'm just like I need to like do something. Like I need to do something with this knowledge that I have from all of you guys. So I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Obviously, it's now the obstacle of myself. You
Mhm.
know, being in the way of my own self and health.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's where I'm at with all this.
and that
I think
balance.
meditation is like the definition of easier said than done. It's
Yeah,
just, it is
absolutely.
so, yeah.
And it's so funny. I would like to pinpoint this. Not everyone, because people might be like, oh, well, Brittany practices yoga. Like, obviously, the people she brings in all practice. Like, no. Like, yes, obviously, some people like Alexis, she clearly talks about being a
Yeah.
yoga practitioner. But the moral of all of the people that we brought on who have gone into these areas, and if you go back and listen to episodes, it comes from having some type of like needing to address mental health,
Mm.
needing to address something in their life, and it's been an outlet for them to do that. So like we're not trying to push like everyone go practice yoga, because like we all practice yoga, but like
Mhm.
we are yoga practitioners, but we know and we see, like, we know many people who see the benefit, and we see a benefit in practicing.
Mhm.
In practicing it as the form and like the beautiful art in a way that it is meant to be, not in the way that it's been
Not
like
the commercial
Yeah.
yoga that you see
Right.
online.
commercialized
Right.
to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just asking Maria out of curiosity. I wasn't trying to
Yeah.
push it.
No, it's okay.
I
No,
honestly was very
I was,
curious
I
to
just,
hear
I
how she
just
was gonna
genuinely, I just
respond.
genuinely did not know. So
yeah, no. All
I
good,
love
all
that.
good.
And not
Yeah.
to pressure you, like, and not to pressure anybody who doesn't do it, like Maria, you
Mhm.
too, like, not to pressure you guys to say you have
Yeah.
to do it, because the truth is, like, I don't do it as nearly as consistently as I should. That's first and foremost. Second, it's a lot of work, and it does require a lot. It requires a lot of you,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
if you have to first go through the process of making the space for it, like
Yep.
making the space for it literally like appear and just like in your schedule. So it's not an easy thing to commit to, but when you do want to dive into it, not only do you have like a community of people, there are hundreds of thousands of people who practice, like you have and like you have a support there, but you know what your intent is, why you're going to do it, and you're going to do it because of the benefit that you're intending to get out of it. But it does, like all good things, require a lot of work.
All good
Yes.
things.
Yes.
It's unfortunate that again in the capitalist society that we are living in, that there's little to no time besides production of whatever service and good that you're producing for the economy.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's literally like the energy. That's what I used to think. I used to think so much. I used to rely all the time on like, I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. And like the reality that I had to face was like, it's not that I don't have time. Like there are people who do way more than me in 24 hours. We all have the same 24 hours, regardless of where we are on the planet. But I didn't have the energy because I was super burned out. And when you're constantly giving, like you're opening your chest and constantly giving yourself to everything that is the wheel that keeps this like society running, it's like, what do I have left for myself now?
And
Yeah.
sometimes it's like nothing, unfortunately.
Right. And the way that I handled it, and Alexis, if you have a perspective on like how you went through this, I had to change the scope of the way that I looked at the day at those 24 hours. And I'm saying this right now, full transparency. And like, I've been really bad at doing this lately. Today was my first day, like back on the horse. I started flipping. I used to say like, these are all the hours that I have to do working, right? I have to dedicate this to something, dedicate this to something, dedicate this to something. And then this is a little chunk that I get left over with. And now I have to hope that I have the energy to do something with that, which I would not do well in those situations ever. So
there's almost pressure to do something too.
It is. And then it sits in the back of your mind, right? You go the whole day and you're like, oh, I still have to do this. And then again, guilt, shame, disappointment. So I started to flip it, and I am trying to get back to doing it. I would wake myself up a little bit earlier, and that would be my first chunk of the day.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Like I would dedicate my first chunk of the day to that. And then I would go on and do everything else that I had to do, because then I would be better prepared. And honestly, that's how I overcame a couple of things. That's how I overcame feeling like shit in my head. Like I would address my mental state first, and then I would move my body second. And that's how my days got better.
That's interesting.
So like it wasn't about giving myself necessarily more time. It was just about switching my time and like flipping it on its head. So instead of staying up later, I'd wake up a little earlier.
Which is probably healthier.
When I do it consistently, it is. That's why I'm because it does. It makes me feel better. But it's all about finding what works for you. That's just like one potential option.
Yeah. I like that method worked for you.
I honestly, and I didn't make it up. I learned it from somebody else. To be total, again, that's why it's important to surround yourself with people who, and I want to get into like your Instagram account a little bit, Alexis, like that. I try to use social media, and like I'm very lucky that we have like mentors that my fiance and I work with. I try to surround myself or get influenced by the people who are living in a life that I want to live, and not necessarily in a sense of like, look at their big fancy house and car, but they have found a sense of happiness within themselves and like purpose within themselves, like that they're taking care of themselves like from the inside. And those are the people that I look to. And one of the people that I look to that like our mentor connected us with was actually the person who taught me about that. So that's why, and like I obviously like I'm very close to that person and want to make sure that I continue learning from that person, because they have that sense of like, I take care of myself, which makes me happy in their life. So who we surround ourselves with and who we connect to, right, is going to have a huge influence on what we're able to accomplish in like taking care of ourselves as well. But yeah. So Alexis, saying that, you have, first of all, I love your freaking Instagram account.
Thank you.
And so I know you've shared a lot about your story with like your own health, and like I know you also share a lot of great things about fitness. I love your videos. So tell everybody about your Instagram account, how they can follow you and all that good stuff. And do you have like an intent behind what you do? Like I see something, but I would love to hear from you what your purpose is and what you do with your account.
Yeah, so my account the handle is just at Alexis T. Moran. My last name is spelled Moran. And it's a personal account. It was my personal account that I just kind of transformed into again, it was at a time where I was struggling to find a balance between personal and professional. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna go for it. I'm just gonna post both and hope that people don't mind it. Hope that my friends don't mind that I'm posting, more stuff about fitness, and hope that people who don't know me don't mind that I'm, wishing my dog a happy birthday. So, yeah, my main intention behind it is just to show people that you can lead a healthy, successful life with chronic illness, but also just to spread the scientific awareness. And I'm not trying to get views from having, this like booty burn workout. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to have the best form I can in terms of the exercises, have the just have the best recommendations for how people can move their body in a way where it's just like, here's some information, no pressure, like just this is what it is. And people with IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, which is ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, a lot of them get, I would say, I think it's like the statistic is like 70% get diagnosed below the age of 30. So it's a young community. And a lot of these people, they're high school, college age, and they're lost. All of their friends are either out drinking or partying, or, and they're just trying to like figure out a way to not have to run to the bathroom. So having a young person's perspective and just kind of leading them through that's just like more the chronic illness side of things. And, yeah, and just tying it all together, and it's just me. That's who I am, is just all of that tied together makes up Alexis.
Because like your
Yeah.
social media account should just be you, right? Sorry,
Yeah.
Brittany, to interrupt you.
Yeah.
No, and it's okay. I
It
can't
should
figure out my
like
words anyway, so please.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like the way that because I've scrolled through your Instagram,
Mhm.
the way that you like present everything, and like to have and of course not numbers don't mean much obviously on social media, but even having like 1,000 followers or whatever, like that's a lot of people looking and like still wanting to look, and it
Mhm.
should be you. I think the bottom line of
Yeah.
my whole sentiment here is like it should be a wholeheartedly you. So the fact that
Yeah.
you said that that's you, like that's good, because I know
Yeah.
a lot of influencers, that's not them. That's just like
Yeah.
the Brittany, taking from your words, like the representative they send out into the world.
Yeah.
Whereas
And I think that's their goal
Yeah.
because they're influencers, that is just their goal, is to be this persona in order to get likes, to get comments, to get followers. And it's my personal account. Like I don't want to be an influencer by any
Exactly.
means. It would be
Exactly.
great to have some people, like use my information and help themselves better themselves. And it's a great way for me to publicize, where I'm teaching yoga at a certain time. But
Mhm.
it's not like meant for me to sell, hunger suppressing lollipops or sell some random fad protein shake.
Right.
That's not, will never be my intention, no matter how many people decide that I'm interesting enough to be on their feed.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
And you're being the actual word of an influencer without being the socially structured word of an influencer. Right, like that's the point. It's like I remember how when we were kids, we always just be like, oh, I'm adult now. Like I'm an adult now, and then we'd always get told like if you have to tell people that you're an adult now, you're not an adult yet. I remember hearing people say that to kids, and like hearing people say that to me, and it's like kind of like one of those situations, right? If you have to tell people that you're an influencer, you're not actually doing what the word means. You're doing what social media tells you the word is.
That makes sense.
But what you brought up, I'm such a like an alignment nerd. In terms of like, now we're gonna talk more about the body sciences, but alignment is my jam.
Oh my
Like,
god, my boss at one of my jobs calls me the form queen. That's so funny. So I'm with you.
Yeah, I'm
with you.
So, okay, for people who don't know what this means, sorry, everybody, but you're welcome at the same time. When we're talking about your body has different levels of functioning, right? In terms of movement, like your movement functions have different capabilities. And one of the ones that can be measured or can be assessed is alignment. And when we talk about alignment or form, it's specifically talking about like your bones have a specific place in space. And when you're doing different types of movement, your form is where those bones should be in space to help you be efficient and you're functional in your movement and safe. So being the person that I am with all the injuries that I have, like going back now, I look at how my alignment was the foundation of all the reasons why I got hurt. And I look at form as being the foundation for all of our movement, because if your bones aren't in the right spot, your muscles aren't doing the work that they're supposed to be doing successfully. And that's how you create all of these places for injury, and it affects all of the other functions of the body. So that's one of the biggest reasons why I love your account. And side note, why I don't like social media. Because I watch what you're doing and I'm like, you can see the intent. Like, you very clearly can see that is your intent, because you're not about like pumping out reps. You're not about doing a lot of weight. Like, I love watching your videos because I can see your form. And it like almost is this like beautiful sense of like a dance. I think that's what always intrigued me about dance anyway, was like seeing the bodies in space. But you don't get a lot of that in the fitness realm, right? Like, this is why people will go and work with a personal trainer and they'll blow out their knee, or they'll blow out their back, or they'll end up with a hernia, or all of these things, because that's not a focus. Like, it's about the action in terms of the result, and not about the what's happening inside the body. So I love that, and I appreciate that so much in your post, along with how that aligns with the rest of your intent on your page as well. Another form of alignment. So guys, really go, whatever personal journey you're going on, whether you're diving into more fitness related things, or you're somebody who maybe can relate to having some type of like autoimmune that you're going through your life, you're carrying through your life with, like Alexis said, like, you have to go through it. There are people that have a similar story and are there to support you. So Alexis's account, we will share it, right, Maria?
Yep, I'll put in the description.
At the bottom bar.
Yep. For sure.
Yeah, Maria handles all of that. This is your creative outlet. That's what I wanted to say before, right? Hopefully, I hope.
It is. It truly is.
Yeah, but if anybody does end up following my page, I post on my stories a lot. If you are interested in yoga ever, and you are either a beginner or you're just nervous about going to a class, I do a Zoom class once weekly. It's just like friends and family yoga, but anybody who follows is welcome to join. It's lower cost. It's about $10. And if you don't want to turn your camera on Zoom, which I always give that option to people who are new to yoga, you don't have to. So if you just want to kind of practice in private, but with me guiding you through it, I'm starting a new series this Thursday called the Align series, which is actually funny because Brittany was just talking about that.
Yep.
But it's specifically about aligning the chakras. So it's 8 weeks.
Chakras.
I'm starting at the root chakra, working my way all the way up to the top. And then the 8th week will just be about total alignment. But if anybody's interested in that, you'll find information on my Instagram stories, and it's open level. I show a ton of modifications. My mom is like my biggest, she like spreads it. She's like, it's really open level. I'm super beginner. And I can still do it. Like, she says it to like all her friends. So she can account for that. But yeah, so that was all I just wanted to add.
Cool.
No, and that's amazing. I think we need more of that. There's so much information, so many classes and things out there to take. But the difference is, with all of that information, how do you find what's right for you? So I appreciate that. Definitely, we'll share all of the information for your social media so people can find you and join you for those classes. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. It has been so nice to get to like connect with you again.
Yeah.
I always loved like any time that we get to have conversations, I always loved hearing your perspective and your insights. So I'm so happy that you are doing well, and that you found what makes you happy.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. This podcast is amazing. You both are fantastic interviewers, podcasters. I can tell you have a great friendship too. So it's been a pleasure to join in on your duo.
Thank you. And you're always welcome back.
Yeah, we will definitely have you back. For our listeners and for anybody who has come on the podcast before, one of our plans for 2021 is we want to kind of just hold like these open chat conversations where we invite back a lot of people who, and honestly, like yoga meditation might be a great one to talk about, based on what we've talked about today, but we invite back like all of our previous guests, and we just kind of like, we're going to talk about this topic today. And we want to hear like all of that conversation and just give you guys a platform to be able to connect to one another, and just see what amazing conversations come out of that. So we'd love to have you back as a guest for one of those like panel chats, but we will keep you posted about that. So yeah, I don't want to like end this, but I also know that like Maria, I'm going to give Maria a huge headache if we don't end this soon. So thank you so much for joining us. And we wish everybody a really happy start to 2021, and we will be with you for the rest of this year. So we've got your back, to keep you informed and in a community to help remember that even as we hopefully move out of this pandemic, you are still not alone.
Yep. Well said.
All right,
Though
cool.
both of you had this whole episode. I was just here.
Maria, I feel like all three of us had like major moments of realization during this episode, so I hope that it helps other people get to that too.
I
So
hope so
again,
too.
thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to everybody on the next episode.